The Truth with Jokes by Franken. Book review. I can't recommend this book highly enough. Of course, I guess it should come as no surprise that I love this book. I was a huge fan of Franken's previous book, Lies in the Lying Liars Who Tell Them. I also enjoyed Rush Limbaugh is a Big Fat Idiot. It's not quite as good and is a little bit dated now, but I still got a few chuckles out of it. Franken's books are liberal polemics, and I guess that's enough to turn away a few people right there. Unfortunately, it's probably going to turn away most of the people who really should read this book, the people who really need to be exposed to the other side of the argument. That's unfortunate. It also kind of, because it's a polemical book, it raises questions of the trustworthiness of it. Now, both for this book and his previous book, I have been kind of searching the internet to try and find out if there's any factual problems with it. I can't seem to find anything. Ann Coulter has responded to a few of the accusations from Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them, but she seems to kind of only dig herself into it more and kind of prove Franken's point. Bill O'Reilly, he was asked about this on an NPR show with Terry Gross, and then rather than respond to the criticisms, he just walked out of the interview. By the way, that one's a few years old now, but you can find it online. It's a classic, check it out. The fact checkers at Spin Sanity, who are, I think, normally reliable and nonpartisan, gave Franken only mild criticism. They said, quote, "Given Franken's stated dedication to getting his facts straight, one is left with the feeling that he is using his humor to imply things he can't honestly argue for." End quote. And that's true. He totally does that. But I can live with that. I mean, I think that's either fair enough or at least it's kind of something that the reader is aware of while they're reading it. The only mild criticisms I would have of The Truth with Jokes are, one, it's a list of everything Bush administration and the Republicans did wrong. So it's biased with its selectivity. You won't find him talking about anything that they did right. So it's unbalanced in that way. But it's a polemic and it's a satire, so you get what you pay for. Two, Franken goes after the lies of the Bush administration. But while he's doing this, occasionally he switches back and forth between the lies of the Bush administration and the lies that right-wing political pundits are telling in defense of the Bush administration. Now, if you're reading this book kind of fast and you're not paying close attention, I think you could get the impression that the Bush administration is responsible for all of these lies. Whereas in reality, many of these lies are coming from the Republican pundits and not the administration itself. Three, Franken puts too much faith in the Democratic Party. He believes that all the problems will be solved if the Democrats get back in power. And if he believes that Democrats hadn't lost Congress in 1994, then the Democrats would have solved the Saipan sweatshop problem. I don't think this is realistic. In fact, I was one of those people who voted for Ralph Nader in 2000 because I was so frustrated with the Democrats kind of not doing anything on progressive issues. Now, I'm older and wiser now. I won't be voting Green Party again. But at the same time, let's not forget the frustration that drove many of us to vote for the Green Party in 2000 in the first place. The fact that Democrats were just not making any progress on any of these progressive issues. Other than that, all those complaints aside, The book is brilliant. Not only is it really funny, but Franken absolutely nails the Bush administration and the Republicans on hundreds of lies and inconsistencies. Some of this is old hat now, but Franken still does a good job of retelling it. For example, the way the Bush team completely ignored the warnings before 9/11, complete incompetence before 9/11, and then in 2004 they ran on their 9/11 record anyways. Or how, rather than take Roosevelt's idea of the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, the Bush administration deliberately frightened the voters and essentially told the voters that they would all die if Kerry was elected. Franken has a quote of Cheney speaking at an election rally before the 2004 election, saying, quote, "It's absolutely essential that 8 weeks from today, on November 2nd, we make the right choice. Because if we make the wrong choice, then the danger is that we'll get hit again, and we'll be hit in a way that will be devastating from the standpoint of the United States." So he's essentially saying there, if you vote for Kerry, we're going to get hit by a terrorist attack. Then, Franken narrates after the election. Franken talks about all the blatant, dirty tricks during the election and the numerous lies in the Bush campaign ads. And then he talks about how George Bush, who won by 2.5%, which was, quote, "the most narrow election victory by an incumbent president in the history of the Republic," and then proceeds to claim broad nationwide victory and a clear mandate for his agenda, and then proceeds to advance issues like Social Security, which weren't even issues in the election. And speaking of Social Security, Franken debunks Bush's plan completely. So, remember how Bush claimed that Social Security had a liability of $11 trillion? This is what Franken has to say on that. Again, quoting from the book, quote, "Where did that number come from? Well, it came from the Social Security Administration, Bush's Social Security Administration. And the number 11 trillion represented the total Social Security shortfall adjusted for inflation from now until the year infinity." That's right, the year infinity. Not the year 2018, not the year 3018, not the year 3,000,018. No, the year infinity. In order to get that number, $11 trillion over infinity years, they also had to assume that people would live to an average of 150, but still retire at 67. End quote. Now that is outrageous. We've gotten so used to politicians lying to us, I think we've forgotten to be outraged about it. I mean, here is our president, elected to serve the people, using our tax dollars to deceive us. And remember when Bush tried claiming that Social Security was inherently unfair to black people because black people died on average at 69 and so only had 2 years to withdraw? Here's what Franken says about that. Quote, "First of all, the study assumed that every African American man would live to exactly 69 years of age and then drop dead. But black people who reach 67 have a life expectancy of 79. And Social Security doesn't just pay retirement benefits. It also pays disability and survivor benefits. African Americans are much more likely than whites to receive both. So, leaving out disability and survivor benefits would skew things a bit, don't you think? Well, guess what? Somehow, they forgot to include them. End quote. I'm quoting a lot, and there's really a lot of great stuff in the book. I'm almost tempted to just quote the whole book. There's so many great examples in here about the lying. From the lying about the war, to the blatant war profiteering, to just plain incompetence. The book really needs to be read in its entirety to get the whole feel for everything the Bush administration lied about. Franken summarizes everything in his conclusion, and I'll just quote that. Quote, "Let's face it, you can't count on them to give you straight information. You can't count on them to tell us straight why we're going to war. You can't count on them to tell us what's happening over there. You can't count on them to do their homework, to keep track of our money. You can't count on them to punish war profiteers. You can't count on them to protect our troops. You can't rely on them for much of anything. Armor, veterans benefits. You can't count on them for the true story of how Jessica Lynch was captured, or how Pat Tillman died, even for how the mission accomplished sign went up on the USS Abraham Lincoln. They actually lied about that. You can't count on them to count terrorist attacks. You can't count on them to count civilian victims. You can't count on them to listen to civilian commanders and send in enough troops, or listen to Colin Powell and not torture people, or not to lie about whether torture policies started at the top. You can't trust them to do the work of actually signing killed in action letters. You can't trust them not to lie about not signing killed in action letters. End point. Now, this is at the conclusion of the book, so all of these points here are just kind of listed as a long rant. But if you read the book, every point in there is fleshed out and explained in the book. So exactly why Franken feels that they were lying on each of those points is actually explained in detail in the book. One more thing. I know this is somewhat old news now after the fall of Tom DeLay, but what I found the most disgusting was DeLay's defense of the sweatshops in Saipan, where, among other indignities, women are forced to have abortions. Franken calls him Tom Forced Abortions DeLay, because DeLay killed bills that would have protected the Saipan workers from these forced abortions. And he blocked Peter Hoekstra's fact-finding trip to Saipan. Franken summarizes this nicely. On the mainland, Tom DeLay doesn't want women to be able to choose to have an abortion. On Saipan, he thinks it's okay if they can't choose not to. Franken, to his credit, acknowledges that this is less about conservative principles and more about political corruption. But I think this hypocrisy extends to the grassroots of the Republican Party. At least I've known some conservatives who, on the one hand, didn't care at all about sweatshop conditions in U.S. territories, but on the other hand, were very pro-life. I'm just going to stop this here. It's an excellent book, a little bit dated by now, but still worth reading.